Good morning to you, and thank you for joining us. The show is Good Morning Africa. My name is Miriam Goto, and it is a pleasure to have you on board just a couple of minutes, about 15 or so minutes past 10 a.m. here in Nairobi, East African time. The show is Good Morning Africa, and this morning I shall be bringing you the latest news from the continent of Africa. But first, we start with the headlines of Kenya's leading newspapers, and we start with the Daily Nation. The main headline: William S. Ruto confirmed the fifth president and incoming commander-in-chief of the Kenya Defence Forces. Also inside, Road to Freedom, a village boy's meteoric rise from Sugoi to the ultimate seat of privilege, wealth and power. That story is on page 2 and 3. Living the dream. Rigathi Gachagua, criticized as unrefined, is now a heartbeat away from the presidency. The story is on page 5. So near, so far for Raila Odinga. This was his best bet, but what happens to his political career now? That story is on page 8. And Uhuru sulks, his choice defeated in the polls. The president vilifies judges as he walks away with a bruised nose. That story is on the back page and also on page 9. And swearing in Ruto to be sworn in as President and Commander-in-Chief of the Defence Forces on Tuesday next week. That story is on page 6. And Chebukati's signed chairman of the Elections Agency says court ruling has vindicated him and his team. That story is on page 14. We turn our attention now to the Star newspaper, and the main pictorial there is of President-elect Ruto, and it says there, "My promise." Then just up there, Raila concedes a defeat, but he disagrees with ruling. That story is on page 2. That's all they have on the front page. And then we turn our attention to the Standard newspaper. Mr. President, on the day his victory was affirmed by the highest court in the land, President-elect William Ruto set out to heal a divided nation, reaching out to his chief opponent Raila Odinga and retiring President Kenyatta, who last night promised a smooth transition from a chicken seller to the hallowed precincts of a state house. It did not come easy beyond the rhetoric. However, the hard part begins. And now that story has a special coverage on page 2, 3, 4, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 14 and 15 inside the Standard newspaper. So that is what we have on the leading newspapers this morning. As right now, I'd like to turn our attention to some other newspapers before we get into some of the stories making headlines from across the continent of Africa. The Daily Monitor from Uganda, the main story: Ruto retires Raila. That is the main headline. And double win for Ruto, how court ruled on 9 petition grounds. That is on the New Vision from Uganda. Daily News from Zimbabwe, Kenya Supreme Court backs Ruto as all of Odinga's poll claims are thrown out. And a Newsday also from Zimbabwe, terrified teachers report for duty. The Citizen from Tanzania, go beyond borders, private sector told, and lessons for Tanzania from Kenya elections. We see that on the front page of the Citizen newspaper from Tanzania. The Daily News from Tanzania spearheads Dodoma outlook. And The Nation from Nigeria, PDP crisis, I will crush my detractors, says Wike. That is the main headline. Worst of insecurity is over, federal government tells Nigerians. Okay. And then The Guardian from Nigeria, Wike accuses Atiku Okowa Ayu of sharing positions ahead of 2023. And then we go on to the Daily Telegraph from the UK, energy bills to be frozen until the next election. That is the main headline. And then the Independent from the UK as well. Truss faces race against time. Desperate Britons plead for urgent help on rising bills. Incoming Prime Minister promises energy package within days. And Tories warn new leader has just months to save the party. We know that Boris Johnson actually is leaving office today, as yesterday the Tory party had chose its new leader. So that is that. All right, so that is what we have on some of the newspapers from Kenya and indeed from across Africa and others from are outside the continent. So I'll just get into the headlines this morning. Just from the headlines. So let us look at a few stories from the continent of Africa this morning, and we start from Burkina Faso, where Burkina Faso's military ruler, Lieutenant Colonel Paul Henry Damiba, says he will honor a promise to restore civilian rule within 2 years under the 24-month transition agreement struck in July with the West African Regional Bloc, ECOWAS. The military ruler's pledge to hold elections that will return the country to civilian rule. Damiba on Monday visited President Alassane Ouattara of neighboring Ivory Coast, a diplomatic foray that came on the heels of a visit to Mali on Saturday. The three countries are battling a bloody campaign by Islamist groups in the Sahel that has worsened the security situation. Damiba and President Ouattara discussed the future of Burkina Faso and the security situation in the region. During the meeting, the two leaders praised efforts against jihadist groups and the collaboration between the two countries in the exchange of intelligence. The Ivorian president said he was encouraged by the ongoing reconciliation efforts in Burkina Faso. And still staying with Burkina Faso, at least 35 civilians have been killed by a bomb that hit a convoy of vehicles in northern Burkina Faso, where jihadist rebels are active, authorities have confirmed. Dozens of others were wounded in the blast on the road between Djibo and Bozanga. Convoys escorted by Burkina Faso's army are used to deliver supplies to towns that are otherwise cut off by the jihadist. Civilian casualties and jihadist attacks have increased since the military seized power in Burkina Faso in January. Burkina Faso, which is one of the poorest countries in the world, has been grappling with a jihadist insurgency that swept in from neighboring Mali in 2015. More than 2,000 people have died, and some 1.9 million people have been forced to leave their homes. Let's move on now to Nigeria, and dozens of Islamist militants have drowned in a river while fleeing ground and aerial assaults in the northeastern Nigerian state of Borno. Security sources now say troops attacked villages on the edge of Sambisa forest where Boko Haram fighters have their hideouts. The jihadists are reported to have abandoned their positions, rushing into a river swollen by heavy rain. Local militias who fight alongside government troops say they pulled more than 100 bodies from the water and buried them nearby. Tens of thousands have been killed and about 2 million displaced by the Islamist insurgency, which began in 2019. And then we head over to South Sudan. The National Salvation Front and South Sudan United Front have expressed doubts over President Salva Kiir's call on them to rejoin the peace process. Their reactions came after last week's call by President Salva Kiir on the holdout groups to rejoin the peace wagon to end conflict in the country. Kiir said the government was committed to the Rome peace talks and the opposition parties to the deal needed to take it seriously. He stated that this would enable the country to move towards credible, free and fair elections. It would also enable the government to shift its focus on combating subnational violence in the country. From his side, the spokesperson of South Sudan United Front, led by Paul Malong, says the group is yet to agree with the government before joining the peace process. Besides, Garang Malual Deng says that SSUF does not understand the basis of the president's call for peace. Like, who does not understand? Who cannot understand the basis of why South Sudan needs to have peace? Okay, but we will come to that in a short bit. Let's just conclude with the news this morning. And we go to Senegal, and former Senegalese minister and UN diplomat Abdoulaye Bathily was appointed on Friday as the new UN Special Envoy for Libya after the Security Council gave its approval. The last UN Special Representative, Jan Kubis, resigned last November after 10 months on the job. The new Special Envoy faces a daunting task at a moment of increased tensions between rival factions in the Libya vying for power. UN political chief Rosemary DiCarlo warned last week that failure to resolve Libya's political crisis and hold delayed elections poses a growing threat in the country, pointing to recent violent clashes that killed at least 42 people and injured 159 others, including That is according to the Libyan authorities. The current stalemate grew out of the failure to hold elections in December and the refusal of Prime Minister Abdul Hamid Deiba, who led the transitional government, to step down in response to the country's East-based parliament appointed a rival Prime Minister, Fathi Bashagha, who has for months sought to install his government in Tripoli. So that is what we have, the latest news from across the continent of Africa. Very interesting happenings, and I think a lot of these news stories are things that we have been following. If you have been watching us here, then you know some of these stories, especially if you've been watching our afternoon show, and then you are familiar with some of these stories. So of course the UN has appointed a special envoy to Libya. The conflict in Libya continues. I don't think anybody is giving it any mind right now, because I don't think there are efforts really to try to restore peace in Libya. We know there are warring factions, one based in the east and the other one based in the west, and there is one that is recognized by the United Nations, and then there is one that is backed by other factors. And you know, as far as the conflict in Libya is concerned, it's quite multifaceted, and a lot of external interference going on, and a lot of interest really that are present as far as that conflict is concerned. So it's just one of those sad situations here in the continent, and one of those wars that we know was started by NATO and those Western countries in their efforts to remove Gaddafi, and they left the country to its own ways, and now see what is happening there. And I don't think they even feel slightly responsible over the mess they created and left in Libya. So we've been left to clear that mess, and as much as they are appointing a UN diplomat to go there and represent the United Nations over what? You're talking about holding elections in December, but this country is not, you can't talk about holding elections while the country continues to be in a state of chaos. It can't happen. There has to be some level of peace. There has to be some level of truce. There has to be some level of coming together. And so then now you have a proper, conducive environment to think about holding elections. So they are looking forward to having the elections in December. I don't know if this will happen. And the refusal of Prime Minister Abdul Hamid Deiba, who led the transitional government, he has refused to step down. So this has further complicated matters, and his rival, who is based in the east part of the country, Fathi Bashagha, has really been trying to make his way to Tripoli to take over the leadership of that country. So this is not just Libyans fighting within themselves. These are just power matrix that is being sponsored by outside forces. Like I said, the conflict in Libya is very complicated, and is not just about Libyans and their support for whoever it is they choose to support. Those are interests, those are proxy wars. We've seen how that has played out. France is in there, countries like Turkey, countries from the Middle East, and the US itself. Remember Khalifa Haftar, the renegade, who was fighting the Tripoli, the United Nations recognized government, and he is a US citizen. So it's very complicated because of the interest and what Libya holds as far as their interests are concerned. And so I don't think Libya will see peace so as much as the US is appointing a diplomat to go in there, like I said, I don't know to do what, because we've not seen the UN really put proper efforts there to try to resolve this matter. Every time they've gone to have talks, at the United Nations Security Council, there has not been a headway, and that is because a country like France, that sits in the Security Council, is part of the countries that are causing chaos. In Libya, a country like the US, they're part of these countries that are sponsoring some of these factions in Libya. So every time they go and a resolution is reached, there's always a possibility of a veto because one of the permanent members is part of that mess. So this has really complicated matters. But in the meantime, the people of Libya continue to suffer, and the state of despondency continues there. But also, I think what really worries me is the fact that even just back here in the continent, the African Union, I think there were attempts in 2019, I can't remember who was the chairperson, before Cyril Ramaphosa. Yeah, we had Al-Fattah el-Sisi, the president of Egypt. I think during that time, he tried to mediate. I think that was the last I heard of African Union trying to, talk about Libya and bring it, to the African Union, Secretariat, and try to see how they can address the issue as far as Libya is concerned. But the problem with that is that Egypt itself is very much involved in the chaos in Libya. So I don't think during that time nothing much could be done because Al-Fattah el-Sisi, as the chairperson of African Union, was not really a neutral, what you would consider a neutral person in that regard. So Egypt was not a neutral party as far as that conflict was concerned. They also have their own interest there, and it has been mentioned and it has been brought up before. They were also supporting Khalifa Haftar because they believe the government in the West is being supported and run by the Muslim Brotherhood. So Khalifa Haftar has been, fighting as that, and we know how Al-Sisi feels about that. We've seen how he has prosecuted members or people who are perceived to be members of the Muslim Brotherhood Party or affiliates. We've seen how that has played out, and I think that also is the reason why countries like the US are finding it appropriate to quietly support that conflict, one side of that, and destabilize Libya. So it's a lot going on in there. But because of that, that has meant that there can't be a moving forward, as a country. And Al-Sisi tried, it didn't go any further. And then I think later COVID happened. Cyril Ramaphosa, president of South Africa, was there. Nothing much really happened. So now the president of Senegal, Macky Sall, is the current chair of the African Union. Still, I have not heard Libya feature as one of the key agendas, or any other conflict across the continent as one of the key agendas of that needs urgent attention. It baffles me how this African Union, operates. You would think things like this should form basis of the things they feel are important. What happened to the agenda 2020 of African Union silencing the guns? That was the timeline that was put forth by African Union itself. And they're saying by the year 2020, we would have made some effort, partnering, of course, with the individual states to address this perennial conflict that continue to claim lives and that fuel, continued conflicts that we've seen. And that never happened. Silencing the gun, 2020 deadline came and went by. Nobody noticed, because we've seen the conflicts continue, not just in Libya, but also in South Sudan. Well, I'll come to South Sudan shortly, but also in countries like Central African Republic. The Democratic Republic of Congo is now a hotspot, and we've seen how that has been playing out among other countries. And the Sahel has just become a playground for terrorism activities. So this silencing gun by African Union, obviously, that it was never met. So I don't know what African Union has to say for itself. So, but be it as it may, I don't think all is lost. We only need a will. We only need a will from the leadership of this continent, because unless these matters are truly, are truly taken care of from an African position, then we are never going to see the end of this conflict. and one of them this conflict in Libya. And I've talked about the issue of internal interference. Some of these people, countries like France, they do sponsor a lot the African Union activities and a lot of things that happen in this continent. And that's why they feel they have a right to interfere in the manner in which they interfere with some of the things that happen in this continent. They feel they have to come and arrange and rearrange and do all these things in different countries in the continent. So that is the sad truth. But I wish to see a day where Libya will go back to know some peace, so that because the falling out of Libya is really, I believe, after that is where we saw intensified activities of extremism. I think during about that time, that's when we saw, because we started seeing a lot of extremism activities in the continent. If you think about it and just look back, so as much as it's Libya's over there, but we see that the ripple effects and how that has spread out, and how that has strengthened even these extremist groups. Okay, that's just a part of it. All right, so we look at another thing to do with peace before I come to South Sudan. So dozens of Islamist militants drowned into a river, because I was reading one of the newspapers from Nigeria and how they captured, I think the government was telling the people that let me see if I can get that. The government was telling the people to go back, not to worry about, let me see if I can get the exact word so that I don't worst of insecurity is over, federal government tells Nigerians. That was on the headline on the Nation newspaper from Nigeria. About 3,407 insurgents surrendered, 96 arrested by troops. Abuja Kaduna highway now safe, 66 terrorists killed, anti-terror war to be intensified, and then 52 captives rescued. While I do appreciate these efforts, critique of Buhari's regime, because especially as far as security is concerned in Nigeria, I think he has not done very well as far as handling the security in Nigeria is concerned. So now they're saying that the worst of insecurity is over, so Nigerians need to relax and not worry so much. And it's good to have hope, and I like that it appears there has been some efforts being made to apprehend and get these people who have been causing a lot of pain and anguish to the people of Nigeria. But still, I'm not convinced. I'm not convinced at all that this is the case, that the security is now under control. Remember, this is something that has been building up for a very long period of time. And Nigeria, the issue of insecurity comes in so many forms. For us in Kenya, all we have to worry about is Al-Shabaab, which I think the government of the now outgoing president, Uhuru Kenyatta, did really a good job in as far as addressing that. So hopefully the incoming government of President-elect William Ruto will build on that and ensure that that stays like that, and we continue to intensify our surveillance and intelligence and things like that, because we've seen that improve over time. So that is Kenya. So as we just have Al-Shabaab and maybe a few cases of banditry and a few fights between a few communities, which I think is something that is not really a small thing, but it is something that I think Kenyans, especially from those communities that are worrying, will appreciate if the government can address that. But that aside, the problem with Nigeria and its insecurity comes in different forms, like I've said. You have to worry about Boko Haram. You have to worry about Islamic State. You have to worry about the bandits. You have to worry about the kidnappers. You have to worry about, it's a lot. It's a lot going on in there. So, and it has only gotten worse with time, because the government did not do enough to try to address these matters as they were starting. The regime before President Buhari came in, the regime before that, and even previous before that. So things have been it has been a build-up. So where it has reached right now, killing a few of these assailants and apprehending a few of these attackers will not do it. You have to dismantle their structures. You have to go after them. You have to look at who is funding these activities, who is funding Boko Haram, who is funding, these kidnappers, who is funding all these people who are causing this, amounts of chaos in Nigeria. So it has to go before you tell Nigerians now they can relax because you have taken care of their insecurity. You have to address all these things. And from what we have seen, Nigeria's intelligence really lacks as far as even getting some information before some of these things happen. People will just drive into a village or ride into a village, because a lot of times they have these motorbikes. They will kill 100 people over long periods of hours and leave like there are no security apparatus in these different places in Nigeria. So I think it should go farther than just telling people that they're safe now and they can just go and sleep at night, at night. So it should go farther than that. But I think we appreciate the efforts that have been put forth, but more needs to be done. And okay, let's look at the issue of South Sudan. And before that, we are joined this morning by Douglas Kirimi. Douglas from Meru County, a very good morning to you.
A very good morning to you, Miriam, and also to our crew at our headquarters, and also to our friends across the world. Good morning, good afternoon, and good evening, depending on where they're watching us from, Miriam.
Mm-hmm. All right. It is a good morning, and in the country, we do have no president-elect as we wait for the new president to be inaugurated. So I already did that news earlier on. We looked at the headlines and the stories and all that. And so now I was just looking at some of the African news updates from across the continent. That is what I've been paying attention to. I don't know, would you like to say something about that development, and then we move on to South Sudan a little bit before our time is up?
Thank you, Miriam. Mm-hmm. We can focus on South Sudan and other African countries since you've already done our own country. I have no opinion on that.
All right.
Sina mahoni.
Una maoni. All right, let's just move on. So the National Salvation Front and South Sudan United Front have expressed doubts over President Salva Kiir's call on them to rejoin the peace process. The reactions came last week after President Salva Kiir called on the holdout groups to rejoin the peace wagon to end the conflict in the country. Kiir said the government was committed to the Rome peace talks and the opposition parties to the deal needed to take it seriously. But that did not sit very well with South Sudan United Front led by Paul Malong. We know he's one of the key stakeholders in this peace process that is yet to agree with the government before rejoining the peace process, and other fractions. And it's interesting what one of them said, Garang Malwal Deng, who said the SSUF, that is South Sudan United Front, does not understand, led by Paul Malong, he said that party does not understand the basis of the president's call for peace. And I was just wondering, who does not understand the basis as to why it is important to have peace in South Sudan? I mean, until when?
Thank you, Miriam. I have a huge problem with people in South Sudan who will always seek their best, or who seek their self-interest at the best of that country. The youngest country in the world is suffering from a leadership gap that people would want to always come to power and continue ruling the youngest country on earth because of its resources. General Paul Malong, Miriam, you know his history. He's ruling Sudan somehow. He has his interest in Sudan, whereas he's not even living in Sudan. He's doing that from Nyeri in Nairobi City County. What we need to understand from the perspective of South Sudanese people, I saw someone post Rebecca Nyadeng Garang, the wife of the former General Dr. John Garang. But I told them for the Honorable Vice President Rebecca Nyadeng Garang to become president, she had to mobilize resources. She has to have her own party. She has to have her own army that responds directly to her instructions, just like Riek Machar has done, General Malong has done, or anybody like Salva Kiir, the president of Sudan. For you to survive in Sudan, Miriam, you have to keep making noise so that when this peace process, revitalized peace process is brought on table again, you get a share for yourself. And that is not the way to build a country. That is not the way to build a democracy. That is not the way to take your country forward. Remember, these people in South Sudan, you threaten people, come up with a small army of people, 100 soldiers or 200 soldiers or 3,000 soldiers, depending on how deep your pockets are, and you get a share of South Sudan. I keep asking myself, when will the Dinka, when will the Nue, when will other minority groups in Sudan South Sudan get a share of the national cake that keeps being shared between General Paul Malong, between President Salva Kiir, between the Garang family and other prominent dictators and generals in South Sudan, Miriam? The greatest question that we should put forward is, when until are we going to share the cake between the Garangs of this world, Paul Malongs of this world, the people who surround Dr. Riek Machar and Dr. Riek Machar himself, and even the lifetime president of South Sudan, Mayardit Salva Kiir? We need to also ask ourselves these pertinent questions. No more Dinka, an ordinary Dinka, and no more Nuel or any other minority group in South Sudan, and the rulers of South Sudan and people of different descent that live in South Sudan, when will they get a share of that country? Will these revitalized peace agreements keep popping up until the interest of these very few groups of people are taken off? And when you feel your part is not taken care of, or your share or interest is not taken care of, you show up and say that South Sudan peace has disintegrated. We need to bring it together. Then bring the revitalized peace agreement again to accommodate your own selfish interest. For us to be able to help the youngest nation on earth, the people of South Sudan need to also put their arms up and declare that South Sudan is bigger than Salva Kiir Mayardit, the president of Sudan, South Sudan, and people like Dr. Riek Machar, people like General Paul Malong, people like the Galangs, and others in South Sudan who keep dragging this youngest country on earth, Miriam, especially Africa, and especially Eastern Africa. We need to also tell them the truth, that their leaders are the greatest barrier to their power and freedom as a people, and prosperity and transformation as a country. Thank you.
All right, thank you so much. And please, you can tell me where you're watching us from this morning. We're back to our regular schedule, and that is the Africa news. We look at the latest from the continent of Africa. In case you're wondering, we already started with the Kenya news much earlier, so just in case you just joined us. And the thing with South Sudan, and I think last week something important happened. Part of the important issues in the revitalized peace agreement was for South Sudan to create a unified force, and it was supposed to be about is it 73,000 or 83,000? I'm forgetting. You could correct me, Joseph Otto. I'm sure you know that, and you're there somewhere in the comments. You tell me. And the initial report that we had received from the government was, as per right now, they were going to graduate about 50,000 of these forces. But last week, the government, I think, just slightly over 21,000 unified forces in South Sudan graduated. And the unified forces, because the country that lacks as far as security is concerned, especially in South Sudan. It's a very unique situation that the country finds itself, because all these forces were drawn from different persuasions. It's like every leader had their own small army and small militant group, and everybody had a command over security as far as their stronghold is concerned. So the idea was, as one of the key factors in the Revitalized Peace Agreement of 2018, was to draw all these forces together, take them through training, and have them know that you are now a unified force of a country called South Sudan, and you do not bear allegiance to any particular person apart from the, I think, president and the country of, and especially the people of the country and the people of South Sudan. And so that the passing out of these soldiers was supposed to have happened long time. Remember the Revitalized Peace Agreement of 2018. So the deadlines, several deadlines have come and passed. But last week, as much as we didn't get the number that was required, but just slightly over 21,000 soldiers were able to graduate. So as much as it's not fully what was expected, but would you say this just goes a long way in just taking the baby steps towards finally maybe realizing some of these aspects of the Revitalized Peace Agreement of 2018?
Thank you, Miriam. You've also noted something that is very important to this conversation, because many people in South Sudan or outside South Sudan, maybe in Kenya or any other part of the world, believe that South Sudan can just come together one morning and combine these all forces of Riek Machar, Dr. Paul Marong, the Galangs and all that, and then South Sudan can move as one under one president. It is impossible because of the selfish interest of these leaders. These leaders have also perfected the art of conmanship in the name of recruiting militia or recruiting rebels and claiming that these people are military people, and a section of maybe 2,000 people, 1,000 or 500 personnel would go ahead to be said to be trained by the military, so that they can now graduate together or pass out together, so that they can be able to keep peace in South Sudan and also grow their country. But what people forget, Miriam, is that Dr. Paul Marong, General Paul Marong, Dr. Riek Machar, the Garangs, and also other people would not want to come to the fore and also make sure that they have also consolidated this as one army for South Sudanese people that can be able to bring peace to the people of South Sudan. These forces would only exist because Paul Marong, General Paul Marong, wants a share of South Sudan. Riek Machar wants a share of South Sudan. And this, Miriam, I remember us having this conversation maybe 1 year and a half ago or 2 years ago about the forces of when Dr. Riek Machar withdrew his forces from graduating or from passing out, and saying that he cannot guarantee the safety of his forces in Juba and all that. These are direct tactics, Miriam, as they continue siphoning the public funds in South Sudan and also taking positions for themselves, mostly positions that they do not deserve. Because in a democracy, you do not form your own militia to negotiate in a national, in a nation where national values, democracy tenets are thrown out of the window, and the man that is with the strongest force or a rebel group or a militia gets the biggest share, and power is shared among a few people. In a democracy, people go to a ballot, like in Kenya. Even though you disagree with whoever you disagree with, you demand that at the ballot. And if they defeat you, you accept it for the next 5 years. And those are going to become the leaders of your own country. And those are going to preside over the affairs of your country, including yourself, who has a dissenting voice over the same. But in South Sudan, what we find, Miriam, is people are also coming together and pouring out their forces, basically their personal militia that continue negotiating on their behalf. Remember, when people who are aligned or forces that are aligned to Paul Marong continue asking to pass out in Juba or graduate from Juba and also be joined into the National Army, General Paul Marong is not there. General Paul Marong is enjoying life in Nairobi. Sometimes the family of Mayardit Salva Kiir, the president of South Sudan, is in Nairobi. They are enjoying life and the gallants of this world. As South Sudanese people, the Dinkas, the Nuers, and the minorities, and every other person that lives in South Sudan continues languishing in poverty, continues suffering constant fear of lack of peace in South Sudan. They have no basic, their basic needs are not met. Cost of living is high, but General Paul Malong and others are sharing power, like as if it is a piece of cloth that they can share, each and every person to get a piece of that clothing. What we need to understand is, in as much as we care about the interest of the supporters or the militia people that are aligned to General Paul Malong, Dr. Riek Machar, and Salva Kiir, Mayardit, the president of South Sudan, or any other interest group in South Sudan, Miriam. We care about their interest, but our country is bigger than Dr. Paul Malong, Dr. Riek Machar, and every other person that has an interest in South Sudan. For us to help, for us to continue praying, for us as people of goodwill around the world, to even imagine that the people of South Sudan cannot enjoy a better cost of living. People of South Sudan cannot enjoy better roads because we have a military or a militia group aligned to General Paul Malong that wants to be integrated in the national army to now accept to act towards peace and development of South Sudan, or according to the revitalized peace agreement. We continue missing it, Miriam, when we continue feeding egos of a few people and selfish interest of a few people. Miriam, I have no disregard for people being enjoined into one national army in South Sudan, but a continual refusal of these people from agitating for a proper and South Sudan, democratically ran South Sudan. We continue suffering that, Miriam, even as people of goodwill. If you have a business in South Sudan, you cannot do the same. And I agree that for us to be able to move forward and also make sure that the revitalized peace agreement works in South Sudan, as people of goodwill around the world, we should put pressure on these South Sudanese leaders. If this group of or generation of leaders from South Sudan is gone, Miriam, another group is going to take over. Paul Malong Jr. is going to take over. John Garang Jr. is going to take over and continue siphoning the resources of a small country and a people that is impoverished to continue funding the lifestyles of a few families, 5 or 10 families, that will continue holding that country hostage instead of letting it go towards the path of transformation and prosperity that is going to benefit the people of South Sudan as a whole. Thank you.
Okay, thank you so much. And of course, the first batch of the Unified Forces, the graduation happened last week. Was it on the 29th, on Tuesday last week? Otto, you're telling me all 83,000 of them has graduated. Since then, have they held any graduation? Because the last I checked, just slightly over 21,000 Unified Forces were able to graduate on the first batch. So maybe they have, I'm not sure, but I'll check that information. But I'm sure that last week, that is the number of Unified Forces that graduated. And I think the other issue that perhaps bothers me is the postponement of elections that were supposed to happen this year. And because of that, of course, President Salva Kiir, and unilaterally, I think because the rest of the stakeholders accused him of postponing this year's election without consulting. And then elections was first supposed to happen this year. And then after that, just a couple of weeks ago, they postponed the elections to December 2024. So when you look at South Sudan and how it is, and the leadership, and like I said, I'm happy to see that progress is being done, however small, but I think it counts for steps towards the right direction as far as the country of South Sudan is concerned. And I do understand another aspect as to why they found it important to postpone the elections, because as it is, they have not even carried out a census. Because you cannot carry out a census if your own citizens are not even in the country, some of them. Others are languishing in the refugee camps, and others are IDPs in the country because of the insecurity that we've seen play out and the communal fighting in some areas in that country. So I do understand that aspect. So maybe the infrastructure that could allow a proper election to happen in South Sudan is not there. That is just one part of my thinking. The other part of my thinking that bothers me is there hasn't appeared to be a will to ensure that some of these things are addressed, maybe with the graduation of the unified forces, maybe the issue of the insecurity will be dealt with, but also there's no proper will for the people, the status quo right now, for a proper transition. Because if you're pushing the elections to December 2024, the UN was ready to offer support, because they're saying they did not have the funding and all that. There are people of goodwill who were ready to sponsor and to take care and help South Sudan fund for its elections, but the leaders were not very keen. So you sit down and you wonder, fine, as much as I think elections is not one of the pressing things in South Sudan, but it also forms a very important aspect as far as the revitalized peace agreement of 2018 is concerned. It was identified as one of those key things that has to happen, but there are no infrastructures that could allow that to happen. So from where you sit, Douglas, as we end, because I think our time is up, do you see a willingness from the leadership in South Sudan to even create an environment that will allow for an election to happen?
Miriam, thank you. I think you've also raised very pertinent questions that can only be answered by resource-greedy leaders in South Sudan, power-greedy leaders in South Sudan, and also attention-seeking gunmen in South Sudan. Miriam, there is no way as a country you cannot be able to hold elections. You keep postponing because you have accommodated four of your friends to become vice presidents and creating non-existent positions, that you keep lying to the people of South Sudan that these positions are going to bring peace to South Sudan, according to the revitalized peace agreement. And at the end of the day, we have a huge problem with the people who keep postponing elections. And remember, elections are a gateway to transformation. Elections are a gateway to development. Remember, Salva Kiir has no responsibility to continue developing South Sudan, because you say, mostly my term ended, my democratic terms ended. Now I'm leading a transitional government that is made up of very many interests, and I cannot be able to push my development agenda as a president of this country. And remember, he has every valid reason to say that. He can say that the money that I get is to sustain me by the grace of God, so that I can leave this country unified and at peace. But at the end of the day, Miriam, we need to also ask ourselves, why are these people in South Sudan not holding elections? According to the revitalized peace agreement, we were supposed to have held elections this year, but they have taken it to December next year. It is only for one thing: power-greedy people, resource-greedy people who continue holding on to power for them to continue benefiting for their friends and other stakeholders at the behest of school-going children in South Sudan who cannot access proper school, cannot get materials, who cannot get water, who people in South Sudan, women cannot go to their farms, women cannot take care of their homesteads in peace, because people who are aligned to those interests in Juba continue holding their country at ransom for their own interest to be taken care of. I've asked before, if these people in South Sudan keep siphoning the resources from South Sudan since 2011 until 2022, today where we are, when will South Sudan take off economically? When will South Sudan take off as an integrated socially and a politically conscious country? When will the South Sudan take its place in the world? When will South Sudanese people come together as a people and as a country united to seek peace that is lasting, so that they can continue demonstrating to the world that they are a democratic country, they are a country that is led by tenets of a democracy, they are a country that is led, that is seeking peace even with their neighbors. If Central African Republic today attacked South Sudan, what will we say? What can we report? If the military from Uganda attacks South Sudan, what can we report? What if from the forces from Juba attack South Sudan? What can we say? We cannot bank on the unified forces in South Sudan to deliver a credible peace, because a peace that holds the country together, secure their borders, secure their internal structures, and also continue protecting life and property of the people of South Sudan. Remember, we as a people of goodwill from outside the license, what we can see from South Sudan is turmoil for resources, is turmoil for power, is turmoil for their selfish interest. What the revitalized peace agreement should do to the people of South Sudan: grant them a new leadership, grant them a functioning nation, grant them a peace that they continue seeking. Remember, they are school-going children and the women that cannot access their homes in South Sudan. They continue being refugees in foreign lands and foreign capitals. They continue roaming the streets of Nairobi. I was in Nairobi yesterday and I saw so many South Sudanese residents, and they can only be in Nairobi if they can be able to sustain the high cost of living in Nairobi, because Nairobi is a high-cost city. It's a very expensive city to live in, which means as children of rich people continue roaming the streets of Nairobi with reckless abandon, spending resources from South Sudan, there are school-going children in South Sudan that cannot be able to read and write because they have no access to school materials, because money meant for school materials, water, classrooms, and teachers, meant to pay teachers, has been shared between Dr. Riek Machar, General Paul Marong, and also Rebecca Nyadeng Garang, and also Dr. Salva Kiir Mayardit, the president of South Sudan, and other few stakeholders who continue holding that country at ransom. Medium, for that country to hold the revitalized agreement to hold in South Sudan, we need to be serious. Elections means development. Elections means commitment. Elections means promises. Elections means that a people are going to be at peace for a period of time.
Yes.
For example, in our country, people have moved on. The main opposition leader, the Honorable Raila Odinga, has moved on. He has considered defeat. President-elect is waiting to be sworn in. And whether I voted for him or not, sorry, Miriam, whether I voted for him or not, it means for the next 5 years, at least our country will enjoy stability. I saw the stock market gained, I think, 42 billion after the Supreme Court of the Republic of Kenya upheld the election of Dr. William Ruto. Those are things that we want to see in South Sudan. Those are things we want to see in other countries. For us to move on as a country, as a nation, as the continent of Africa, and even other countries in the world, we need to hold elections. In Africa, if these elections are not held, there will be no responsibility in Juba. There will be no responsibility in other towns and cities in South Sudan. There will be no responsibility in counties in South Sudan. The president will be relaxed. The president will become lazy. Nobody will hold him into account. If corruption happens in South Sudan, they will say, we'd rather have corrupt leaders or stolen public offers instead of bloodshed in South Sudan. Even Miriam, even if there will be no people who will be dying, you cannot have peace when people are hungry. You cannot have peace in South Sudan when children can no longer access their schools, when teachers are running away to neighboring countries and all that.
Yeah.
I believe, from my perspective, the unified forces, Miriam, should do one thing to the people of South Sudan: have a conversation with the leaders in South Sudan, hold elections, period.
Okay. I don't think they have such powers yet, unless you're saying the leader coup. I don't think that is what we want in South Sudan. Personally, I'm cautiously optimistic, and I'm just hoping that they will do what they're supposed to do as far as guaranteeing security inside South Sudan and within its borders. Yes.
If leaders in South Sudan continue holding themselves onto those seats, we only have one option for us to be able, if these unified forces, because they respond to different interests and different people, different leaders, they can only guarantee peace in their country so that they can vote, so that they can move on as a country. Because Salva Kiir is not interested in leaving the president's power. The vice presidents, the four of them, are not interested in leaving those ceremonial yet powerful and full of resources, and also full of power positions in quote, because they can be able to renegotiate something for themselves. It is only the unified forces, if they have any power, that can be able to bring, even if it's not drastic change, it's a change that can bring elections in South Sudan. Because these leaders will postpone elections from 2024 next year to 2025 or 2027.
They have been postponing these elections for a while now. I think 2019, and then they postponed to this. They're supposed to happen this year. No, 2020, and then President Salva Kiir postponed to this year, and now they have been postponed to 2024 in December there. Joseph Otto, thank you so much. You're saying it was necessary to postpone elections. All of us agreed. You cannot do elections with two different army. That is why unifying the army was first priority. I do agree with you on that matter. I agree with you with that, because like I said, for an election to happen, then there has to be proper structures that will allow for that election to happen. There are other issues that must be addressed and must be taken care of before elections are able to happen. And so I partly agree with you. I think that is one key component for a successful election to happen, and I'm hoping, like I said, Douglas, I'm cautiously optimistic, and I'm hoping that the unified forces are truly unified. The years of training they've gone through in those cantonment camps, I want to hope that they are ready to serve the people of South Sudan. Douglas, you're laughing. That is my hope, but I am cautiously optimistic based on the history of the leaders there in South Sudan. But I am happy that progress seems to be happening or is being made. Okay, all right. Okorocha Mike, you're saying, why is all these unions existing? African Union, European Union, United Nations, all these fallacies, their non-existence is better than their existence. Well, I think the European Union is working for the Europeans. I think the United Nations is working for the crafters of the United Nations, and the big dogs are really taking advantage. Us as Africans, we just go there to rubber stamp things that are happening. We don't even have a country here that has a permanent seat in the United Nations Security Council. So as we just go there as I don't want to say flower girls, because I think they play a very important role in a wedding, but we just go there as a formality. We really don't have a say. And so these other countries get to do their politics, because I think this is an elevated political gathering on a global level where we see these power plays being carried out, and we just sit there and watch and take whichever side or do whatever it is, Asia and the continent. But the United Nations seems to do whatever it is that is meant to do, if you understand. It is the African Union that I have a problem with. What is it doing? So I agree with you, Okorocha Mike. I do also have questions as far as African Union is concerned, and very well. I think we have to take a break. Nwokoma, a better man. Thank you, and Gladwell, thank you so much for watching this morning. And we come back. Angola went to its elections, I think, on the 24th of August. A couple of days ago, and President Lourenço was re-elected, but the opposition is challenging that election, so that will form the basis of our next conversation. Thank you so much for your time this morning. My name is Miriam Agoto. Thank you so much, Douglas. Don't go too far. We shall be right back.